Welcome to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in today for your regular host, Cy Kellett. In my opinion, the best host in Catholic radio, and every day we talk for 2 hours about apologetics, evangelization, how we can be better Catholics, how we can know our faith better and respond when folks ask us questions about it. Or we have many non-Catholics that also listen to our show. They want to know more about the Catholic faith because they have a lot of questions. That's what we're here for, is to answer those questions. My normal job is the fundraising director here at Catholic Answers, but every now and then, Cy takes a day off or he takes a trip, in this case, to Utah. He and Tim Staples are there for a couple of days giving some talks at a local parish up there in Utah. So if you're listening in Utah, perhaps Cy and Tim can hear us. Hope you guys have a great trip, and we'll be praying for you. Our guest today, first for the second hour of the show, is our own Jimmy Akin. Jimmy is going to be having an open forum, so any questions that you might have about the Catholic faith, feel free to call in hour 2. But in the first hour, we have a special guest, a very good friend of the apostolate, Father Hezekias Carnazzo. Father Hezekias is the pastor of St. George Melkite Catholic Church up in Sacramento. He is a married father of 7, including 5 boys, 5 boys, 2 of whom are here in the studio today. So we're glad to have them. And our topic today is, what does an authentic Catholic culture look like? What is Catholic culture? How do we discern the way to live our Catholicism in our daily lives? What should we be doing? What shouldn't we be doing? These are the types of questions that Father Hezekias is here to answer today. And the number to call is 888-318-7884. Again, 888-318-7884. We want to hear your questions about how do we live our Catholicism in our daily lives. Father Hezekias, welcome.
David, it's a blessing to be with you and your participants today. Really honored to be here at Catholic Answers.
Well, thanks for coming in, coming all the way down from Sacramento. We appreciate it. You also recorded a Catholic Answers Focus episode, right, which should be posted here in, I don't know, I guess about a week or so. What did you talk about for that particular?
Well, we're talking about the Feast of Pentecost, which really comes full circle to really what we're going to be talking about today, and that is living our Catholic faith, not something which I merely adhere to intellectually, but because I adhere to it intellectually, I also live that out in my daily life. Catholicism is, and Christianity is to be lived, and is to impact every aspect of how we live. And of course, today we face a very difficult challenge in our secular society, but also within the church itself. We've very much sadly lost a sense of living as Catholics.
Indeed. And I think even as, however you might define this, the best Catholics, right? There are times we go through our lives and we may, if we become introspective, see ourselves as living almost a Sunday Catholicism.
Oh yeah,
if you will.
Oh, definitely. And we can talk more about that. But we certainly talk in the church about the Eucharist as a source and summit of our life. But of course, the summit of a mountain is one which we must hike to get to, right? But how most oftentimes sadly we treat the church, I would say, more like a vending machine. Yeah, I come, I get what I want, the Eucharist or confession, whatever the case may be, and I leave having received the things I want to get out of it. And that is the beginning and the end of my experience of my Catholic faith. But of course, if the Eucharist is the summit of our life, then there's an entire mountain in between that we have to climb. And I often say, look, if you're not getting what you want out of the faith, it's because you're climbing the mountain of God out of breath. Yeah, you're not prepared. You haven't prepared yourself to really receive what the Lord wants to give us at that summit. And because we haven't been living through it during the week, we haven't been living our Catholic faith, living out the communion which we received on Sunday and experienced in the resurrection. And so we must once again learn to live out our Catholic faith in all aspects of our life. And this is going to take intention. It's going to take an intentional way of living and making some real hard choices about what we are going to allow in our life, and what we're going to cultivate in our life, in our homes, so that our faith becomes the central mystery of how we live.
And you have I would say almost a distinct area of expertise here, because not only are you a Melkite priest and the pastor of a parish, but you're also the founder of the Institute of Catholic Culture, which is based out of Front Royal, Virginia. And the Institute of Catholic Culture is an adult catechesis apostolate,
That's right.
if you will. Tell me a little bit about what led to the founding of that. How did you choose the name, for
Sure.
example, and how does that tie into our topic today?
Sure. Well, as I grew up in the faith, as I was raised, I was baptized when I was 10 years old, so a little late. But as I was raised, I very much raised in a way of learning about the faith. And it wasn't until I'm a graduate from Christendom College, and it wasn't until I went to Christendom that I began to realize that the faith was more than, as Pope Benedict has said, a packet of dogmas, but it is a way of life. And when we begin to live that way of life, we begin to live the way we were made to live in the image and likeness of God. Ultimately, we find what is truly fulfilling. And I experienced that. I found that. And then I said to myself, what are we doing hiding this gift? And that is a Christ-centered way of life. I learned there in those days that Christ is the center of history. He's the answer to the philosophers. He is the revelation of the theologians. That truly our faith is what we would say theocentric, God-centered. And because of that, our entire life is also theocentric. There's an old philosophical principle that you cannot love what you do not know. You cannot love what you do not know. But of course, the flip side of that is that when we come to know, we then can live accordingly. So when we come to know the truths of the faith, we can then live in accordance with these truths, which are, as I say, theocentric. We are made in the image and likeness of God. And if we come to know him, we actually begin to hold up a mirror in front of ourselves. St. Augustine says so beautifully that the creed in which we confess the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the creed ought to be to us like a mirror. When we confess it, because we are confessing the truth about who we are and what we are made for, and then we begin to discover what it means to truly live as a Christian.
Very good. Father, you ready to take some calls? We've got a call up on the board. Why don't we go ahead and get started? We'll take a break after this call, but we have Thomas in New Jersey on line 1. Thomas, what is your question for Father Hezekias?
Hi, Father. I just have one thing to say. Amen to what you just said. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
This show is a perfect subject matter for me because I was just thinking about it, on my way home from work. And it's like, Apple just published something, Amazon and Starbucks all came out with an announcement that they're going to, help abortion people over the state line if they can't afford to. And I'm thinking, here I am talking to you on an Apple phone. I had my Starbucks this morning. Well, what can a Catholic person do? And I don't know if we could boycott everything, but what can we do as Christian Catholic people to sort of deal with this stuff? And in addition to that, you can't go around either. I'm living in a work environment too, so I can't go around saying, "Oh, that's a sin. That's a sin. You just did a sin," and like how do you act and things like that. Maybe some advice. I don't know.
Sure. And for those, and Thomas, thank you very much for your question, and your point is a very good one. For those who maybe had a hard time hearing Thomas's question from New Jersey, is asking, look, we're hearing all sorts of things about Amazon and all these companies now threatening or offering, if you will, money to their employees to cross state lines if they find themselves in a state that limits access to abortion for women. And I would just say, first of all, Thomas, don't be surprised. The evil one, the mark of the evil one is always death. And the mark of Christ is always life. Yeah, so it's so easy to see the fingerprint of the devil if you start to understand our faith theocentrically, right? So God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, living a life of loving communion from all eternity. And our relationships on earth, whether it be a mother and her child in her womb, or our marriages and so forth, are meant to reflect this reality. And remember, friendship, relationships, these are created realities, are created by God, so that when our life is lived in communion, we reveal the life of the Holy Trinity. Yeah? But of course, the devil wants to stamp that out, wants to break that apart. And so the fingerprint of the devil is always the same. It's always going to be death. It's always going to be divorce. The breaking apart of relationships. So don't be surprised. Don't be surprised, number one. And I would say also, Thomas, maybe we can get into this more as we move forward, is living a life of Catholic culture is not so much about removing things, it's about putting the right things in place. And so often, especially in some of our more conservative communities, we're always removing things. For our children, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. Well, that's part of it. But that's only the beginning. Unless we put something back in its place which is truly a lived Christian life, then we're ultimately going to be left with exactly what you said, Thomas. I can't just stop shopping everywhere. I can't stop just doing everything and isolate myself and not participate in anything. You're right, Thomas. You're absolutely right. We are hungry for something more than just removing things, yeah? And we have to learn again as Catholics to put the right things in place.
Very good. Thomas, how was that answer for you?
That was great. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thanks for your call.
You
God bless you, Thomas. The number to call is 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting support provided by Homeschool Connections. Homeschool Connections hosts the Catholic Homeschool Conference. The 2022 Catholic Homeschool Conference is June 10th through 11th, and the website is CatholicHomeschoolConference.com. That's CatholicHomeschoolConference.com.
By providing quality programming faithful to the teachings of the Catholic Church, EWTN is television that viewers can trust. Whether it's films, documentaries, news coverage, lively discussion shows, or kids programs, we highlight the truth that is the eternal Word. For a complete schedule of EWTN television programs, visit EWTN.com and click TV. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in today for Cy Kellett. Cy will be back again soon. He and Tim Staples are actually up in Utah giving some parish talks. That is one of the big things we do here at Catholic Answers is we love in-person events. You talk to our president, Christopher Check, and I think there are very few things that are as close to his heart as the in-person events. In fact, here in San Diego, we run what we call a local lecture series, and Father Hezekiah, who is our guest today, will be speaking at one of those tomorrow evening at St. Therese of Carmel. But something to look forward to is this coming September. In fact, September 22nd through the 25th, 2022, at the Hyatt Regency La Jolla, we are hosting here in San Diego the Catholic Answers National Conference. This year's focus, this year's theme is the Eucharist. I am with you always. It is a great 4-day event. You'll have all of the usual Catholic Answer speakers, of course, Tim Staples, Jimmy Akin, Trent Horn, Carla Broussard, Joe Heschmeyer, Cy Kellett, and Christopher Check. But our guest speakers this year at the conference are Bishop Thomas Paprocki of Springfield, Illinois. We'll have Dr. Lawrence Feingold, Simone Rizcala of Endow, Catholic Answers live taping of the show, and a special evening concert featuring the Men of Floriani. That is on Thursday evening. You can get your tickets today by going to CatholicAnswersConference.com. There is early bird pricing now. You use the promo code EARLY, you'll get $50 off. The full conference ticket includes the Saturday night banquet dinner with the keynote from Bishop Paprocki. And if you go there right now, there is a limited number of rooms available, but for $169 per night, you can get a room at the Hyatt Regency La Jolla in beautiful, sunny San Diego for the Catholic Answers National Conference. Again, September 22nd through 25th, coming up this year at CatholicAnswersConference.com. That's where you can get your tickets. Father Hezekias, you had some additional thoughts, riffing off Thomas's question earlier, about the corporate aspect of what we're seeing.
Well,
continue, please.
Yeah, I mean, the question, and Thomas, please don't take this the wrong way. It's a great question. It's one that's at the forefront of our minds. In fact, we were just having lunch here at Catholic Answers talking right in those terms. But I think it also reveals something fundamentally, something problematic about how we as Catholics, as Christians, are approaching our life. And that is my life a question of what I consume? Am I simply a Christian consumer? Yeah? Because this is what the secular society has made us to be. And now my question becomes, how do I just consume things which are safe within Christianity? But of course, we're not just consumers. We're not just people who buy at the right stores and eat the right foods, but rather we are people who live our Catholic faith to its fullness. We live the life of the Holy Trinity. And so I would just to go back, and maybe we'll have a chance that other people might want to call in and talk a little bit about this. But just two things I think in this conversation with Thomas, and that is I not only want to remove things which are bad for me in my life, and of course that might very well may include what kind of coffee I'm buying. I'm not saying that's not part of it. But what do I put back in its place so that I can begin to cultivate an authentic Christian life within me and within my family? And that ultimately, I think, is the more important question. It's not that it's not important to ask whether, of course, I don't want to be supporting and in some sense funding by supporting a business that's doing this kind of thing about, with the abortion business and things like that. But what am I putting in my life that allows me to live my faith in all of its beauty, in all of its glory? And this is where I think many Catholics today are struggling to live as Christians. I would say oftentimes, sadly, we're living as secularized Christians or a secularized Christian culture. And this is ultimately not what we're made for. We're made for something much more than that.
Indeed. 888-318-7884 is the number to call. 888-31-TRUTH. We are talking about what is authentic Catholic culture. How do we live Catholicism in our daily lives? How do we become more than just Sunday Catholics? And how do we discern what should be in our lives, what should be out of our lives? And if we take something out, how do we replace that? Give us a call, and we'd be happy to discuss this further. Again, 888-318-7884. Now, Father, as a father of 7 children, so we think about it from an adult perspective and how we have to make decisions. How do you consider it with your children, which range, I believe, from 15 to the youngest is how old?
2 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have the whole spectrum there, essentially, up to high school, right?
Sure. To be honest with you, I don't ask that many. I don't really ask that question. How do I'm going to instill this in my children, apart from how am I going to instill this in me? Our children want to be like us. Yeah, they look up to us by nature, and they see how we live. So oftentimes I've been involved in religious education with children for many years, and parents want their kids to be formed in the faith, and so they drop them off to Sunday school, and while they go to Starbucks, of course, and get the cup of coffee. And this is part of the problem, is that I'm always pointing the finger at the next generation and say, why is it that you are not living your Christian faith? And why don't you want to go to Sunday school? Well, I want to ask the parents here, are you going to Sunday school? Because if you're not learning the faith, if you're not growing in the faith, how can you possibly expect your children to think that's important? And if you want to instill that in your children, then you better make it part of your life. And going back to this idea of Catholic culture, which maybe we can dive into a little bit about what it looks like, is something that the parents and the adults must be doing. I mean, it's not a matter of getting my children to do it. It's a matter of creating that life for my entire family, and then inviting my children to participate in this higher reality, in this truth to which they are called. And if I can make that part of the culture of my home, then I can make it part of the life of my child.
And then as a spiritual father, as the pastor of your church, do you have these conversations often with your parishioners?
Well, sure. I wish I had it more often, of course, but the point is, of course, not really necessarily having this conversation as much as doing this conversation. It's so important that we as Catholics begin to live together again. As I said before, all of our faith is theocentric, Christ-centered, yes? God-centered, Trinity-centered. And therefore, our church is meant to reflect this reality in living a life of loving communion between ourselves. But again, I go back to the vending machine problem. How many of us treat the church like a vending machine to which I come to when just barely getting there in time to fulfill a Sunday obligation and leaving before the crowd gets out and clogs the parking lot on the way out, right? And so I run in and I run out, whereas our church ought to be that place where we assemble and where we live the fullness of our life together. Rather than being the first one to leave our church on Sunday, we should be the last. We should be truly living together. Well, living means eating together. It means dancing together. It means rejoicing in the gift of God together. We ought to be praying together. We ought to be fasting together. We ought to be living together as Catholics. And this is what we have to restore in our churches, and that is so lacking. There's a beautiful quotation I have from Pope Benedict. I always love Pope Benedict. The guy, every time he opens his mouth, it's quotable. It's so spiritually rich. And he says, we must reappropriate the contents of the faith, not as a packet of dogmas and commandments, but as a unique reality revealed in all of its profoundness and beauty. Of course, the unique reality he's talking about is the life of the Holy Trinity. And I ask you and challenge our participants today, does your church look like the life of the Trinity lived out on earth? And if it doesn't, what things do we have to put in place to make that reality shine again in our communities?
What a great thought. We got a couple more calls up on the board. Why don't we go to James in San Antonio? James is listening on 89.7 FM. James, what is your question for Father?
Well, I was telling the screener it's more of a comment, and it deals specifically with that issue that was voiced about coffee and worrying about a pro-abortion coffee company that has good coffee, but hey, what am I going to do? And I discovered by reading National Catholic Register about 2 or 3 months ago, they had a big article on pro-life coffee. And I actually found a coffee supplier, which I've purchased coffee from online, that they recommended, that donates 10% of their income from the coffee to pro-life causes, pregnancy care centers, pro-life shelters, and especially to buy ultrasound equipment. And it's wonderful. I feel so good. I buy pro-life coffee. I know it's going to a good cause. It may cost a little more because 10% of their money goes to pro-life, but I'm happy to do it. So there are alternatives out there, even in coffee. Just want to let everybody know that.
James, you're absolutely right, and like Thomas, I support what you're saying, and we need to be looking for good Catholic organizations, good Catholic companies that support true Christian values and support them definitely. But I want to take you a step further and ask you where you're drinking your coffee and who you're drinking your coffee with. And how is it that your coffee and the coffee you're in, the people you're in discussion with, are bringing you into the life of the Trinity? And I know I'm taking a way step further. I'm taking a big old leap for you, but I'm going to challenge you, because this is really where I think we need to be asking ourselves these questions. We need to stop isolating ourselves and drinking our coffee. And that's where we begin to start to talk about really lived Catholic culture. Not just about what I'm consuming, the businesses I'm supporting, but how I'm living my life in communion with those that God has put in my life, so that in that communion, in that relationship, the life of the Trinity, the life of love, the self-giving life, John says in his epistle, St. John says in his epistle, that God is love. And of course, love is the giving of our life to the beloved. Jesus says, no greater love has any man than to give his life for his friend. This is the life we are called to. And whether it be your coffee that you're drinking, whether it be the dinner you're eating, or the church you're going to, it ought to all be for the purpose of revealing the life of God on earth.
There is so much to talk about, so much more to talk about as we consider the whole picture of Catholic culture. Give us a call, 888-318-7884. Again, 888-318-7884. We will be right back after this.
Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you. Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Hi, this is Janet Williams. You don't have to be a woman to enjoy Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson, the fundraising director here at Catholic Answers, sitting in for Cy Kellett, and our guest today is Father Hezekias Carnasso. Father Hezekias is a Melkite priest. He is the pastor of St. George Church up in Sacramento and the founder of the Institute of Catholic Culture. And we are talking today about Catholic culture. What is culture, which maybe we'll get into in a moment. How do we define that word alone, secular versus Catholic? We've had a couple of good calls already, and we've got a couple on the board. But let's go really quickly to Jan in Michigan. She is listening on Ave Maria Radio. Jan, you have a question for Father Hezekias.
Hello, Jan. Go ahead.
Hello, Father.
Yeah. Hi, Jan.
Yes, hello, Father. I am just curious. I'm a practicing Catholic, have been all my life. Very involved in church, but I'm just curious. Wanted to know. I'm so surprised that you are married. How is it that you can be married?
Yeah, sure.
Is it the Roman I know the Eastern part here. I know the Eastern and the Eastern that I know that they are people are married there. In fact, our pastor has a friend who is a married priest who's in the Eastern sect. But I just wondered. I was very curious.
Sure.
Sure. How is it that you're married?
Sure. So I am a Byzantine priest. I'm a Melkite Greek Catholic priest, and so it is part of our tradition. The Catholic Church is maybe bigger than we could ever have thought. Truly, it is universal, and that is, it encompasses all peoples and ways of life that are in conformity with God's way of life, and then raises them up to God to give thanks to Him in the Eucharistic liturgy. And it has been the practice of the Eastern churches since the very beginning. St. Peter was married. Yeah, remember Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law. And so it was the practice of the early church to have both a celibate clergy and married clergy, and the East has maintained that practice from the very, very beginning. So we have in our tradition both celibate clergy, most of the time monks in monasteries, and then a married priesthood that usually serves as pastors in churches, and so forth. So that's the background to a short background anyways to how it's possible. I know, of course, in the West, we are mostly, the majority are Roman Catholics within the Catholic Communion, but I'm Melkite Greek Catholic from the Church of Antioch within the Catholic Communion, of course, but expressing our faith in our life according to the people of the Middle East, which is always, as I said, maintained a married priesthood.
Very good. Thank you, Jan. Appreciate that question. And in fact, the Melkite rite, if you will, traces its origins back to the very first bishop of Antioch.
That's right. St. Peter was the first bishop of Antioch before he went to Rome. So
there you go.
Absolutely.
Very good. Let's continue with calls. Father, let's go to line 2. Mac in Washington. He is watching on YouTube. Mac, what is your question for Father Hezekias?
Hey, first of all, thanks for answering my phone call.
Of course.
I just have a little bit of a confusion. Can you hear me?
Yes, Matt. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just, my concern is basically when it comes to, say, marriage and dating before marriage, because I realize one thing the church talks about so much is about abortion, but we don't talk mostly about premarital sex and just the whole sexual act of it, which is part and parcel of the reason why you have the likes of abortion and fornication and contraceptives. And given in the world we live in today, it's kind of very hard for you to even just try getting to know someone or dating someone without falling into either of these three sins. So what is the best approach? And it's very good that Father Hezekiah, you're married. Maybe you could help me on this, because it's kind of scary trying to date knowing very well that I'm either going to end up fornicating or we're not going to get along when you say no, the other party says yes, or, stuff like that. And it's not something the church talks about so much.
Well, Mac, this is a very good question, and it very much relates to the center of what we're talking about today, and that is that we are like fish out of water. We are, as Christians, living in a secularized society. Of course, secularism it comes from the Latin word secula, world. Yeah, a world-centered way of life, and that is that this world, this earth, this life is all there is, and therefore I live my life not in reference to eternal life, but live my life simply in reference to this life and the pleasures of this life. Whereas our Christian life gives us a further purpose for life, yeah? And you speak about the challenges of sexual immorality, but of course the church talks very much about sexual morality, and that is living a life that is appropriate to the Christian in this way, yeah? Sex is a great gift given to us by God. To reflect the life, again, of the Holy Trinity. The challenge we face, Mac, is that we're trying to live these things in this fish out of water atmosphere. In a secular world, we're trying to date and get married rather than in a Christian world. that supports the way of life of the Christian. We find ourselves in this challenge, and I'm not going to say that it's not a challenge for you. It's hard to find a spouse within the Catholic faith, but this is why the Church has always said that it is preferable to marry one who shares our faith in common, to find someone who you can live with and share the most important things in common with, and then strive in purity to the kingdom of God. Yeah, marriage is one of the most difficult or challenging things that is given to us, because it enters us into this relationship of love, which is meant to reflect the Holy Trinity. But to do that, we have to put around ourselves an atmosphere in which we can live. We can't be fish out of water. Yeah, because otherwise we're going to fall into the very thing you're talking about. We have to put around us an atmosphere. We have to be breathing in Christianity constantly if we're going to stay alive within the Christian faith. And there's the fundamental problem. Now, I go back to the life of our communities. Our churches so oftentimes don't have a vibrant social life into which I can engage, but we must strive for that. And if you don't find it within your community, then you have to strive to build it within your community. When you're at Mass, Mac, you ought to be meeting the people at church. If you've been going to your parish and for a year, 5 years, 15 years, whatever the case may be, and you're sitting down in the pew and you don't know the person next to you, you don't know their name, you don't know where they live, you don't know anything about them, we have a fundamental breakdown of the parish life itself. I'm going to share with you, Mac, a beautiful insight again from Pope Benedict. He says, without a doubt, a mending of the fabric of society is urgently needed in all parts of the world, which is what you're talking about, Mac, right? I go out there into society and the whole system is broken down, right? What should have been relationships which would have glorified God becomes relationships which are broken and do not glorify God, yeah? So there is a breakdown in our society itself. I'm going to begin again. Without a doubt, a mending of the fabric of society is urgently needed in all parts of the world. But for this to come about, right, in order for the world to become healthy again, for this to come about, what is needed is to first remake the fabric of our ecclesial community itself. We have to remake the fabric of our churches so that our churches give us the atmosphere in which we can live again as Christians, in which I can meet somebody who shares my faith, who is striving like I am toward the kingdom of God. And only in that context, I believe, Mac, that we'll be able to escape from the attacks of the evil one and begin to ascend that mountain of God again, breathing the fresh air of the Spirit which God wants to give to us.
Very good, Mac. I hope that was helpful. What do you think?
Let me ask this.
Sure.
For instance, I work in your parish, and take, for example, I have a girlfriend, and we are not married, but you know very well that, for example, we are in a relationship that is not consecrated. Would you, as a priest, come and tell me? Because it's not happening in most of the churches. And you mentioned about my parish. I'll tell you what, I'm the youngest guy in my parish because the people around me are all in their late, say, 50s, 60s. So it kind of leaves a very big vacuum.
It's a big challenge.
That's the reason why I asked the question.
Yeah, it's a big challenge, Matthew. I'm going to encourage you to find a community that is vibrant. Find a community that is growing in the faith that can support you in this walk. Because without that, you're going to continually struggle. You're going to continually stumble. And there are good communities out there. We have to look for them, and we have to actively pursue them, and we have to actively cultivate them. Yeah, we're talking about Catholic culture. Culture. The original context of culture is an agriculture. Yeah. A cultivating, a tilling and keeping, yeah? And we ought to be tilling and keeping in our parishes, tilling and keeping in our relationships. And until we begin to do that as Catholics again, and until we begin to remake the fabric of our church community itself, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to survive in a secularized atmosphere. We will fall, because we are at the prey of the evil one who wants to destroy us and to destroy true, authentic relationships. We have to get out there and begin. I just give you the image of the hoe and the garden. We got to go out there and start tilling and keeping again. We have to make Sundays what Sundays are supposed to be about, and that is not fulfilling an obligation. It is living out the invitation to come into communion with God, and having encountered him, to then turn to our neighbor and love him as God has first loved us. Our Sundays ought to be the most vibrant part of our lives, in which all of the friends of Jesus are coming together at our house, at their house, in our parishes, and again, living together, talking together, sharing the most important things together, that we might grow together again in Christ.
And Father, for someone like Mac, perhaps, who is attending a parish that is maybe not meeting his spiritual needs outside of the context of Mass, how would you suggest someone like Mac search out these additional communities, perhaps?
It's a matter of searching. They're out there, Mac. Mac, are you in Washington, D.C., or are you in the state of Washington?
State, yeah.
Washington State. I mean, I don't know your particular situation, but I would be looking around. Number one, the center of culture is the cult. Yeah, is worship. The center of every culture is worship, including secular culture. Secular culture has its churches. They're the gym, because the body and my self-preservation is what it's all about. And so our gyms, you used to see churches being built on every corner. Now there's a gym on every corner, right? That's secular American society. And so in a similar way, we have to be looking for places in which we can exercise our Catholic faith, in which the center is the most important thing of our life, which is our worship of God. You want to find a good parish? Find good liturgy. Find a parish where the Mass is celebrated with respect, with dignity, with glory, where when you walk in, you know not whether you're in heaven or on earth, where the kingdom of God is truly made present in the liturgy. In the West, there's a lot of good Latin Mass communities which are celebrating the liturgy very beautifully. You can find a Byzantine church. I guarantee you this: you find good worship, you're going to find a good parish. The two are ultimately related. And where the cult breaks down, where God is not worshipped, then the society within that, the culture within that community will also break down, guaranteed. The two things go hand in hand.
Very good. Well, more good answers from Father Hezekias. We're going to take a quick break here, the last one of this first hour. We are talking with Father Hezekias Carnazzo about Catholic culture. What is it, and how can we fully participate in it? We'll be right back after this.
Hello, this is Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco. Keep your dial tuned to Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting by Great Catholic Music.
Great Catholic Music, your one-of-a-kind streaming platform for traditional Catholic hymns and contemporary favorites 24 hours a day. Music that soothes the soul, that's safe for the whole family to listen to. What a relief. Great Catholic Music. Download the free mobile app, or listen on any Alexa-enabled device, or write from your PC or tablet at greatcatholicmusic.com. Great Catholic Music. Melodies for the soul.
I'm Jeanette DeMello, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register and co-host of Register Radio with Matthew Bunson. Join us every week as we talk with the Register's expert writers and editors about the news you need to know, and offer authentic Catholic insights on the important stories that impact your life. Register Radio, every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern and Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, here on EWTN Global Catholic Radio.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in for Cy Kellett today, and we are talking about Catholic culture with Father Hezekias Carnazzo. He is the pastor of St. George Melkite Catholic Church up in Sacramento, California. And we're going to go right back to calls, Father. Let's go to Claire in Ohio on line 3. Claire, what is your question for Father Hezekias?
Hello, thank you for taking my call.
You bet.
I am interested in writing stories like fiction, that sort of thing, and I was wondering if you had any advice, Father, about how to incorporate the faith into stories and kind of to use it as a method of evangelization.
Oh, Claire, I love this. Really, because now we're talking not about being a consumer, but being a creator. And of course, we're made in the image and likeness of the Creator of all things. We are meant to do this very thing, to be creators and to bring the faith, to bring the gift of God's life into all aspects of this world, to literally till. This is our mission. This is what God has made us for, to till and keep the garden of the Lord so that it grows in His image and likeness, so that it blooms, it blossoms with His love. And so whether it be, as you're talking about writing novels or playing music or cooking food or drinking wine, this is or dancing. I tell people, we are a people of the resurrection. Yeah, Christ is risen. Christ is risen. And when you realize that God has loved us so much to become one of us, and then to literally bring us out of the tomb, that Christ walked out of the tomb and gave us the possibility of eternal life, then we no longer can walk. We have to dance. We can no longer talk. We have to sing. Yeah, and we have to begin again to till and keep the garden of the Lord. And so, in your particular situation, I would just encourage you, Claire. I don't know the steps necessary to be taken, but there are many opportunities for Catholic novels to be written in which the principles of the faith, the fundamentals of morality can then be brought. I mean, let's all be honest. The entire Hollywood business is about corrupting morality. It's all about immorality and getting people involved in it, right? And cultivating the passions in this way. So Claire, take a look at what they're doing and do the opposite. Yeah, cultivate in writing novels, cultivate for your readers the life of God's love, of sacrificial love. Model that for them so that they can learn through your novels the way to be a Christian. And I would say that's just going to extend right through your novels to every aspect of our life. We as Christians have to learn how to dance again, to sing again, to feast again, to fast again, to pray together again, to live together again in all aspects of our faith, so that, as we were talking with Thomas earlier, the atmosphere that we're breathing is Christian again.
Very good. Claire, I hope that was helpful to you. Good luck on your novel career, and give us a call back if we can help any further on that question or any other that comes to mind. Father, I am the fundraising director here at Catholic Answers. I do have to take just a moment to suggest to folks that if you are looking for a way to connect more deeply with Catholic Answers and you are not a member of Society 315, our monthly Givers Club, this is a great time to join. You can go to casociety315.com, sign up for $10 a month. You join Society 315. You stay connected with us on a regular basis. You get a t-shirt. You get a car magnet. You get a permanent 20% discount anytime you go to our shop and buy any of our books or other products. And if you join Catholic Answers Society 315 today, you are going to get in time to be invited to a June 8th webinar hosted by Cy Kellett featuring our own Trent Horn. And it's going to be talking about the repeal of Roe versus Wade and the potential aftermath of that. So go to casociety315.com, sign up for Society 315 for $10 a month, and you will become more deeply connected to us and get that invitation to that June 8th webinar for Society members only, with Trent Horn and Cy Kellett talking about Roe versus Wade. And Father, this is again a perfect another aspect to talk about, perhaps, in the idea of culture. And here we are at maybe a seminal moment in the pro-life movement. What role should, let's say, the government, the courts, other things play as we look toward what a Catholic culture should look like,
well,
if any.
Ultimately, the government should be at the service of Christ. The entire purpose of the governing of society is to bring man to his natural end or his fulfillment, which is at the feet of Christ. So the government's job is ultimately to do that, to create an atmosphere in which Christianity, in which truth can grow within man. So I think, God willing, we'll see a good decision come out here in this situation. But I think for Catholics, especially listening to Catholic Answers, wanting to explain the faith to others, we must always be theocentric about our explanation, about our apologetics. Why are we pro-life? Because God's pro-life. From all eternity, the Father has poured out his life to the Son and the Holy Spirit. God is love, and love is the sharing of our life with the beloved. Christians are made to be life givers. This is what, and you want to know the mark of the devil? Contraception, which is against the beginning of life. It is the stopping of life. It is the breaking apart of life. It is the destruction of life. That's the fingerprint. So we again, it's important as we share our faith with others that we bring them back to the first principles, namely to be always theocentric in our explanation and say, this is what I believe about God. God is love. And love is the sharing of our life with the beloved. And therefore, I am, who am made in his image and likeness, am made for this. I am pro-life because God is pro-life. The church is pro-life because God is pro-life. Not because Paul VI woke up one morning and decided he didn't want people contracepting. No, he woke up one morning and decided he wanted people to be Christians. I'm sorry. I'll get off my hobby horse on that one.
That's fantastic, Father. And I want to, as we begin to wrap up the hour here, I want to thank you for a great hour. This is such an important topic, and I think you had some great things to say about how we can build this authentically Catholic culture, both within our own homes, work toward the greater good of society. But I also want to give you a few moments to tell us about the Institute of Catholic Culture, which you founded a number of years ago. I had the joy of participating in it when my wife and I lived in Northern Virginia a few years back before we came out here to San Diego to work for Catholic Answers. Tell me about what the Institute of Catholic Culture, the goals behind it, and then what's going on right now that people should go and visit.
Sure. Thank you, David.
Home.
No, the Institute of Catholic Culture is all about what we've been talking about, and that is creating a place for us to live as Catholics and to begin to learn the truths of our faith again, that we might ultimately live them out, and to assist people in living them out and getting to know one another again, and then learning to live. So the Institute is first and foremost an educational organization dedicated to the formation of the Christian to come to know the Lord, and then ultimately to come to know who we are made in his image and after his likeness, and then ultimately to be able to live in that image and likeness again. So that there's the process, and we do that by studying God's interaction with us in history, man's discovery of wisdom and philosophy, the discernment of revelation and theology. We're studying sacred scripture together. We're studying the catechism of the Catholic Church together, but ultimately not so that we become smart or that we begin to learn the faith as a packet of dogmas, but ultimately so that having encountered the Lord, we might begin to live again the life that God has given us. The Institute is not for Catholic culture. The Institute of Catholic Culture is exactly. We're about Catholic culture, and we do more than study. Yeah, we learn to sing again the hymns of the church. We begin to we do a lot of even some cooking together, learning to cook on feast days and prepare ourselves to invite our friends over to our homes and really rejoice in the gift of our faith together. And of course, as I said earlier, it's all free of charge because Jesus says, "You've received freely, give freely." Everything at the Institute of Catholic Culture is offered free of charge. You come check us out at instituteofcatholicculture.org. There's over 1,500 hours of on-demand educational programs, and we have live programs going on all the time. Father Scalia is going to be coming and talking with us in the next few weeks, as many really qualified professors, teachers, holy priests, bishops coming to teach and encourage us in our Catholic faith, so that while we find ourselves in this secular society, we can once again begin to let the Spirit create an atmosphere around us in our homes, in our relationships, in our churches. instituteofcatholicculture.org.
Very good. Well, Father, thank you again for being here. God bless you. We'll be seeing, you're going to be hanging around for a couple more days.
Yes.
You're doing a talk tonight. And then if you happen to be in the San Diego area, check out St. Therese of Carmel. Father will be there tomorrow evening, expanding on some additional thoughts that he has. Father, again, would you leave us with a blessing, please?
May the blessing of the Lord and his mercy be upon you through his grace and love for mankind at all times, both now and ever, and unto ages of ages. Amen. Christ is risen.
Christ is risen indeed. Amen. Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, Hour 2 of 2 hours today on apologetics and evangelization, as you have come to know and love. I am David Matheson. I'm the fundraising director here at Catholic Answers, and I have the privilege of sitting in for Cy Kellett, who is actually traveling with Tim Staples in Utah today. They are giving a couple of parish talks up that way, and I get the chance to sit in with not only you, the listeners, today, but here in the second hour, I get to sit in with Jimmy Akin, our own Jimmy Akin. Jimmy, welcome.
Oh, glad to be here. Welcome to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We have an open forum this hour. The number to call is 888-318-7884. Again, that is 888-31-TRUTH. The lines are filling up. If you'd like to get your question in this hour, I'd encourage you to call as soon as possible. And if you get a busy signal, call right back and we'll try to get you on the list. So, Jimmy, you've got, you are, of course, the author of The Bible is a Catholic Book. You have also written a number of different 20 Answers series brochures or booklets for us. One of the most recent is the Book of Revelation. I believe you've got another 20 Answers coming out soon that you're working on right now.
No, I finished it.
It's done.
I turned it in a few weeks ago. The new one is going to be on 20 Answers, the Gospels.
There you go.
And so I'm going to be talking about the four Gospels, how each of them is distinctive, who wrote them, when they were written, why we should trust them rather than apocryphal Gospels. Do we know anything about Jesus outside the Gospels and stuff like that? But I turned that in a few weeks ago. It only took me 8 business days to write it around my other duties. So it was went pretty quick.
Indeed. And in fact, that ties right in. You are fresh off what I thought was a fantastic debate with Bart Ehrman here at a local parish on the reliability of the Gospels. And I only mention it not only because you did such a great job, but also if you missed that debate of Jimmy and Dr. Ehrman, it is posted on YouTube. So you can go back and revisit that debate. Again, if you just go to the Catholic Answers YouTube channel and search for Jimmy Akin, Bart Ehrman, you will find that. Since that debate, Jimmy, any additional thoughts? You have any other debates coming up?
Well, I did a debrief or two on the Bart Ehrman debate, and if people go to youtube.com/Jimmy Akin, which is my YouTube channel, they can watch the debate there. They can also watch a debrief I did afterwards. Recently, Bart posted the video as well on one of his channels, and he did a blog post about it in which he conceded that I was a really nice guy, and so that was nice because I was deliberately trying to be really nice with Bart, and that message seemed to have come across.
Indeed.
Have subsequently done a debate or two since then, but if people are interested, they can go to youtube.com/Jimmy Akin, and I have a playlist of my debates and debriefs.
Very good, very good. Well, Jimmy, we've got a full list of callers up here. How about we get right to it?
Sure.
Okay, great. Why don't we go to, let's go to Blake in Nebraska. Blake is on line 1. He is watching on YouTube. Blake, what is your question for Jimmy?
Hi, Jimmy. So I've heard that in the early church, the sacrament of reconciliation was to the whole congregation, and it was mainly just for like the major mortal sins like adultery, murder, apostasy. I was wondering, did they confess almost like lesser mortal sins like missing mass, masturbation, other things like that in front of the entire congregation, or was that done separately, or like just to the priest like now, or something completely different?
So the evidence we have about the earliest forms in the earliest ways in which confession was celebrated is rather spotty, because we're talking about the 1st century, and almost all of the literature we have from that period is found within the New Testament. And we do have indications in the New Testament that there were communal confessions. The New Testament in the epistles says, confess your sins one to another. and that suggests a kind of group confession. However, at the same time, we see evidence that the presbyters or priests were involved in this. In James chapter 5, for example, James associates the forgiveness of sins with the ministrations of the presbyters or priests. And ultimately, it was realized that you don't need to do this in front of other people other than the priest. It's really the priest as Christ's minister that has the ability to do this. And so the communal aspect is not essential to the sacrament. It was something that apparently was done in the early church, and not just in the first century, but for the first few centuries. However, eventually it was discovered, big surprise, people will more readily confess if they don't have to do it in public. And so as a result, the practice of just privately confessing to a priest became common. And the role of the Irish was particularly notable in that regard. The idea of private confession was popularized in part through Irish Catholic culture, although it was there even earlier. We have references from early non-Irish individuals like Jerome and so forth who talk about private confession to a priest. So it clearly was being done. It just wasn't originally necessarily the normal mode the way it is today. In terms of what was confessed, well, we do have records of people confessing major things like abortion and adultery and lapsing into paganism and things like that. But there was kind of a learning curve, if I can put it that way, on the part of the church as the Holy Spirit led the church in doctrinal development. And over the course of time, there came to be a greater understanding of exactly what counts as a mortal sin and what did not. In principle, any sin that was recognized as spiritually killing your soul, that's what a mortal sin is. You lose the spiritual life that God has given your soul, which we know as sanctifying grace. Anything that you lose sanctifying grace, anything that calls your soul to spiritually die is a mortal sin, and that would have been confessed. What happened over time, though, is the Holy Spirit led the church into a greater appreciation of the exact boundaries of mortal sin and what the conditions are that need to be fulfilled in order for something to count as a mortal sin. And so in terms of like confessing lesser or greater mortal sins, well, I don't think they thought about it in those terms. They would have confessed anything that they recognized as a mortal sin. In an individual case, a sin might be lesser enough that it might not have been perceived as a mortal sin in some communities or by certain individuals, just like today. Individuals who don't recognize that something they're doing is gravely sinful and therefore it's not a mortal sin for them because they lack adequate knowledge of its moral character, well, they wouldn't confess that. And the same would have been true in the early church. But in principle, anything that was recognized as a mortal sin would have been confessed.
Very good, Blake. I hope that was helpful to you. We have got a full slate of callers here, so we're going to continue to move on, and we've also got a break coming up, so we're going to step away for just for a moment. Great start to a full hour of Open Forum with Jimmy Akin. The number to call is 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. We will be back right after this.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Do you have a question but prefer to ask it privately? Catholic Questions can help. Go to CatholicQuestions.com to ask your question online, email us, drop us a letter, or give us a call. Longtime Catholic Answers Live apologist and author Jim Blackburn or another Catholic Questions apologist will be happy to assist you. Catholic Questions proudly supports Catholic Answers Live, so visit us at CatholicQuestions.com today. That's CatholicQuestions.com.
Thank you for all the work that you've done. I work at it and then it's like, I stop and then I start and then I stop. You've done so much and thank you for everything you do. And thank you, EWTN. I had a line that I could spread at work today from what I heard this morning on EWTN, that it took a woman to put Jesus on the earth.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in for Cy Kellett today, and we are in the middle of an open forum with our own Jimmy Akin. The number to call is 888-318-7884. Before we get back to calls, I do want to remind folks that the National Conference, the Catholic Answers National Conference, is returning this September, the 22nd through the 25th in La Jolla, California, which is right outside beautiful and sunny San Diego. The theme for this year's National Conference is the Eucharist. I am with you always. We have some special guest speakers, including Bishop Thomas Paprocki of Springfield, Illinois. But of course, we also have our own Catholic Answers speakers led by Jimmy Akin. We'll have Tim Staples, Trent Horn, Carlo, Joe, Cy, and Christopher Check, our president. Simone Riscala of Endow will be there, as well as Dr. Lawrence Feingold. It is a fantastic 4 days of fun, 4 days of education, 4 days of apologetics and evangelization, and we will also be broadcasting live the Catholic Answers Live radio show with Cy Kellett from the conference as well. Right now, if you go to CatholicAnswersConference.com, you can buy your tickets, CatholicAnswersConference.com, and if you use the promo code EARLY, and this is not a permanent thing, this will end soon. If you enter the promo code EARLY, you will get $50 off each ticket. A full conference ticket includes not only all of the talks, but the banquet dinner with the keynote address by Bishop Paprocki. And finally, if you stay there at the Hyatt Regency, we'll get you, for right now, we'll get you a special room rate of $169 per night. All the details, go to CatholicAnswersConference.com. That's where you can register and buy your tickets. Let's get right back to calls. Again, we've got a full slate of callers up here. Let's go to Aaron in line 2. Aaron is calling from Rhode Island, and he is listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Aaron, go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for answering my call.
You bet.
So I was wondering how I can... So in Matthew 16 it says, whoever wants to be a disciple of mine, take up your cross and follow me. I have a bunch of secular friends. Practically none of them believe in God. So I was wondering, throughout my day, how can I still honor God, but I go to school with them, and I don't... You know what I'm trying to say? It's like, how do I still honor God?
It's a great question, Aaron.
Even though living with a bunch of secular people.
Well, make time for God. So, even if you're not doing it in front of them, you can quietly say a prayer to God at different points during the day. You can set aside time for personal, Bible reading or reading the catechism or doing a devotion of some kind. It's really up to you. I mean, the things that you want to do are things that you make time for. And so if you want to maintain a focus on God, which is a good thing, then set aside time for God. It doesn't have to be a big chunk of time. It may be little chunks of time during the day. And just make an effort to do those things. You don't have to promise that every single day I'm going to do this, but make a regular habit and think in terms of, as you go through the day, think in terms of how would I regard this from a Christian point of view. You want to kind of process running in your head all the time, keeping the faith relevant to your experiences. You don't want to just forget about the faith completely. It doesn't mean you have to think about God all the time. God doesn't expect that of us. He expects us to direct our attention to other things we need to deal with in this life. But you do want a kind of general frame of reference where you are regularly thinking about God and thinking about your experiences through a Christian lens. And ideally, at opportune moments, you want to even talk to your friends about God. But that does, like I said, that doesn't mean every moment, but it's something you don't want to hide the fact you're a Christian either. And so, look for opportunities where they may be open to hearing about something from the Christian perspective.
What do you think about that, Aaron?
All right, thank you.
You bet. Thanks for calling in.
I think that's really helpful.
Great.
Good.
God bless you. Okay, let's go to line 3, Chad. Chad is watching on YouTube from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Chad, what's your question for Jimmy?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. My question is about Micah 5. As you know, this is the chapter that predicts the Messiah's birth in Bethlehem. And just a couple of verses after that, it says, of this figure who will be born in Bethlehem, it says, he will be our peace when the Assyrians invade our land and march through our fortresses. We will raise against them 7 shepherds, even 8 commanders who will rule the land of Assyria with a sword, the land of Nimrod with a drawn sword. He will deliver us from the Assyrians when they invade our land and march across our borders. So my question is this something that Jesus did? Did he fulfill this role? And if not, is this something that will be fulfilled in the future?
Well, it's hard to say whether there will be a fulfillment of this in the future. Of course, that's possible. But the way Christians have traditionally looked at this is to see this as something that has been fulfilled through Christ, although prophecy is not always fulfilled in the way people expect. One of the things that Jesus made clear was that his kingdom is not of this world. He said, if it were, then my followers would take up swords and defend him and so forth. And he indicated that's not what his kingdom is about. So even though there were passages that could be read in a way that would expect a kind of political military Messiah, that would be a political military leader, Jesus indicated, no, really he's going to bring about his kingdom in a spiritual way rather than a political military way through the advance of the gospel. And so a standard way in Christian history of understanding this passage in Micah would be to say, well, he did that in keeping with his own terms. In terms, he was going to advance his kingdom spiritually and conquer people spiritually through the gospel, and that's what happened. In fact, that's what happened with the Assyrians. At one point in time, the Assyrians were politically and militarily opposed to God's people, Israel, but after the time of Christ, they converted. They became Christians. In fact, the Assyrian Church of the East today is explicitly Christian, and other people from the Assyrian region, including Chaldeans and so forth, and Syrians, they became Christians, and so the gospel did triumph over them, and that can be seen as the way in which this prophecy was fulfilled.
Okay.
What do you think?
I guess what concerns me a little bit is that it seems to me that for a prediction to have evidential value, it needs to be comprehensible or understandable prior to its fulfillment. And so it sort of seems like what's happening is that there's a tendency to kind of reinterpret these prophecies in such a way as to make it fit a preconceived conclusion, which is that Jesus is the Messiah. Is there any truth to that? That maybe that's what's going on? I mean, I highly doubt. Would you agree that if you were living prior to Jesus, you would probably understand this prophecy differently?
Yes, I would say prior to the time of Jesus, I would understand the prophecy differently because he hadn't yet come and made clear how he planned his kingdom to work. So I wouldn't appeal to this particular passage as providing the bit about Assyria. I wouldn't appeal to that as providing proof that Jesus is the Messiah. There's a difference in science between what's sometimes called proof-oriented research and process-oriented research. In proof-oriented research, what you're trying to do is provide evidence or proof that something is true. In process-oriented research, you're no longer trying to prove how something works. You're trying to understand the process by which it works. And so when it comes to messianic prophecies, I wouldn't appeal to what Micah says about the Assyrians as proof Jesus is the Messiah. I would appeal to other passages that contain clearer messianic prophecies as evidence or proof that Jesus is the Messiah, but then having understood that Jesus is the Messiah, having discerned that truth, I would then say, okay, so what can we learn about Jesus from a process-oriented perspective? How does his messiahship work? And at that point, the gospel evidence comes in that he did not intend to be a political military leader. Instead, he intended to be a spiritual leader, and therefore We need to understand passages that make him sound as if he were a military leader in spiritual terms instead. So I would say we need to be willing to shift from a proof-oriented perspective to a process-oriented perspective. How does his messiahship work? And thus, some passages may be appropriate to appeal to when trying to prove that Jesus is the Messiah, and other passages may need to be understood in terms of what has he revealed about how his messiahship works.
Thank you, Chad. We appreciate your call today. We're going to keep on moving here with a full slate of callers waiting here to ask questions of Jimmy Akin. In fact, we're going to go to line 5, an anonymous caller from West Virginia watching on YouTube. Anonymous, ask your question of Jimmy Akin.
Hi, Jimmy. I'm a social work major, and I'm about to enter into my internship. And my internship is with families, where I'm going to be helping fathers reunite with their family. And I was just wondering how I should approach that if, say, the father is not married to the mother, and the goal is basically me trying to get them to live with each other again. I don't know how I should approach that with that possibility in mind.
Well, I don't know the constraints you're operating under in your program, but there is a good to having both. I mean, under ordinary circumstances, there is a big benefit to having both parents involved in the lives of their children. Children who grow up with only one parent have as I'm sure you know from your coursework, have markedly less successful life outcomes than children who grow up with both parents involved. And so there is a good there. At the same time, there is an evil if the parents are living together and sleeping together and are not married to each other. So what has to happen is a kind of weighing of the comparative goods. Now, ultimately, these parents are adults, and you are not responsible for the choices they make. What you can do is encourage them to make better choices, and a better choice than having the father completely uninvolved in the children's lives would be to have the father involved. And another better outcome would be for the father to marry the mother and commit to each other. And I mean, under ordinary circumstances, would be to have the father commit to the mother and get married and raise the children in a family. And so to the extent your program permits you, I would encourage them to do that as well, to talk about the benefits of marriage and how it can help them and how it can help the children and so forth.
Anonymous, I hope that was a good answer for you. We'll certainly keep you in our prayers, and we're going to keep on moving here. Let's go to Nicole in South Carolina. Nicole is listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. And Nicole, if we can't get fully through Jimmy's answer here, we'll pick it up on the other side of the break, because we do have a break coming up. But Nicole, go ahead and ask your question of Jimmy. Nicole, are you there?
I've been...
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this question, but recently I've been interested in, techniques for interpretation of the Bible, and I've been really interested in typology, and I was just wondering your perspective on, the utility of that for interpretation of...
Okay, so I should probably start by clarifying what typology is, because it's a term that not everybody is familiar with. Basically, one of the things that's been noted for a long time is that in addition to the meanings that you would come up with just based on a straightforward reading of a biblical text, particularly in the Old Testament, you also see what look like kind of foreshadowing of things that will happen in the New Testament. For example, in the Old Testament, in one passage, the prophet is saying, on behalf of God, out of Israel or out of Egypt I called my son. And it's clear from the context, on the literal reading, the straightforward reading of that text, the prophet is talking about Israel, the whole nation, as God's son. And yet, when Christ the Messiah came, he also spent time in Egypt, and he was then called back from Egypt after Herod the Great died. And Matthew, the evangelist, picks up on this. He knows the Old Testament statement about Israel being called out of Egypt as God's son, and then he sees, wow, when Jesus comes and he's God's son, he also gets called out of Egypt. And so Matthew points out that one of the fulfillments of this prophecy was Christ's and the Holy Family's flight to Egypt and then their return from it. And so what happened with Israel as a nation when they went to Israel and came back was what's called a type of what happened with Jesus. Jesus is the antitype of the original type, because they both went to Egypt and both came back, and Israel's experience foreshadows Jesus. So that's kind of a brief look at typology, but in terms of how we can use it, we'll discuss that on the other side of the break.
Very good, Nicole. Stay with us. Jimmy's going to pick it back up, as he said, on the other side of the break. We'll be back in just a little bit. You're on Catholic Answers Live, Open Forum with Jimmy Akin, 888-318-7884.
Have you enrolled in the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics? Let me ask you a more important question. Do you believe as a Catholic that you have an obligation to share the Catholic faith? In fact, the Church has answered this question, and the answer is that all confirmed Catholics are obliged to share the faith. It's actually in canon law. Catholic Answers is here to help you fulfill that obligation. Our School of Apologetics courses will equip you to help all the people you come in contact with understand what the Church teaches and why. A great place to start is with all the Catholics in your life. Learn the art of apologetics from the best of the best and start sharing the gospel today. Visit schoolofapologetics.com. That's schoolofapologetics.com. Here's a question. Is it really possible to be friends with someone who died 2,000 years ago? Maybe the problem is that we've grown way too comfortable with the story of Jesus. Nice man, right? Taught us to love one another, said not to judge people. We celebrate his birthday every year. It's time to put away this small, safe version of Jesus, says Cy Kellett. Nobody that bland could have transformed the world. In A Teacher of Strange Things, Cy presents Jesus Christ undiluted by sentiment, with all his radical words and deeds uncensored. Do you know someone, your son or daughter perhaps, or maybe your mom or dad, who needs the friendship of Jesus Christ? Do you? Order your copy of A Teacher of Strange Things by visiting shop.catholic.com today or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Hi, this is Janet Williams. You don't have to be a woman to enjoy Women of Grace tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on EWTN Radio. Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in for Cy Kellett today. We are, as we typically are on Thursday, we are in the midst of a 1 hour of open forum with our own Jimmy Akin. The number to call is 888-318-7884. And Jimmy, you were in the middle of talking to Nicole about typology, so I'll let you continue that answer.
Yeah, so a type is something typically in the Old Testament that foreshadows something later on, typically in the New Testament. And the thing that a type foreshadows is known as its antitype. Now, over the course of time, the Church has had it, and Catholic thinkers have had a chance to reflect on the role of typology. And if you look in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it has a brief summary of, this is in the section on Scripture, so it's very early in the Catechism where it's talking about the sources of faith. But it has a very brief discussion of how to interpret Scripture. And one of the things it points out is a principle that goes all the way back to the beginning of church history, which is that we need to first discern what the literal sense of a text is before we start looking for additional meanings. So you want to understand the literal sense first. And what the literal sense is, that doesn't mean what you would think if you took everything woodenly literally. Like, for example, if Jesus is telling a parable and he says there was this father who had 2 sons, and one of the sons went off and lived a life of sin and then came back, he's telling the parable of the prodigal son, it would be the wrong question to say, oh, what were their names? Because Jesus is not talking about a real family here. He's using a literary device of a parable to teach a spiritual lesson. And what the literal sense of the text is not that there was literally a family like this. The literal sense is the sense that's intended by the sacred author. And so when Luke is recording the parable of the prodigal son, Luke is intending to preserve the teaching of Jesus, and thus the spiritual message about forgiveness that Jesus was teaching. So the literal sense of the parable of the prodigal son is not about a specific family that lived somewhere. It's about the spiritual message of forgiveness. And so what you need to do in interpreting Scripture is figure out what the original author's intent was, what he was trying to communicate, taking into account the fact that the human author may use figures of speech and parables and all symbols and all kinds of things like that. But once you've figured that out, you've got the literal sense. After you've done that, you can then look for additional senses. And these additional senses, if they're genuinely there, are things that were intended by God, the divine author, even though the human author may not have been aware of them. For example, the Old Testament prophet who said about Israel, out of Egypt I called my son, he probably didn't know that the future Messiah was going to be in a similar situation where the Messiah would have to go to Egypt and then come back. What he was aware of was the nation of Israel had done this, but God was aware of this additional application of the prophecy. And so when we're exploring additional meanings, what we're trying to discern are not what the human author understood, but what God would have understood. And we see biblical authors doing this. Like if you look in St. Paul's letter to the Galatians, he has a passage where he talks about the modern Jerusalem and the new Jerusalem that Christians belong to as reflecting Abraham's wives Sarah and Hagar. And if you read Genesis, where we hear about Sarah and Hagar, you wouldn't suspect that in the literal sense, certainly there's nothing there about the city of Jerusalem or New Jerusalem. This is an additional spiritual meaning that God was aware of and that St. Paul picks up on, but it's not part of what the original author was intending. In terms of how to discern types, well, what you need to do after you've figured out the literal sense of the text is think about, well, to what degree is this text similar to something else I know about, particularly something in the New Testament? And to the extent that it's similar, like going to Egypt and coming back if you're God's son, it serves as it can serve as a valid type. So you can identify types by thinking about the similarities and the degree to which a passage in the Old Testament is similar to some concept from the New Testament. But there's also an important caution here. This is a principle St. Thomas Aquinas talks about, we don't want to appeal to spiritual meanings or typological meanings when we are trying to prove something, because what spiritual meaning a text may contain is not as obvious or certain as its literal sense. And so St. Thomas Aquinas would say, like, if you're in an apologetic argument with someone, you don't want to grab some spiritual meaning and say, this proves what I'm trying to say, because your interlocutor, the person you're talking with, will just say, well, I don't see that at all. This is just a meaning you're seeing in this text, but it's not what the human author intended. And he would be right that the human author didn't intend it. The problem is, how do you prove God intended it? And so for apologetic purposes, that's really hard to do. And so for apologetic purposes, we should stick to trying to prove things with the literal sense of the text. But then once we make that shift to process-oriented thinking, and we are understanding the process process of how of God's whole plan and how it all fits together, that's where it becomes reasonable to start looking beyond the literal sense to these additional meanings.
Nicole, thanks for your call today. We appreciate it. We're going to keep moving here and go to John on line 6. John is calling from Cincinnati, Ohio, listening on 740 AM. John, go ahead with your question.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. It's an honor to talk to Jimmy and the team.
Thank you.
You bet.
I have a hypothetical question, kind of debating in my own mind, but
what is it?
So I'm Catholic. I'm baptized, confirmed, had the Eucharist. I have no mortal sin that I'm aware of, and I'm able to go into a time machine back to the time of Moses. I am able to approach the Jewish people in the desert. They have the Ark of the Covenant, and I walk up. Somehow I'm able to get to it. I walk up to it. I grab it. I maybe even open it up and look in there. Am I able to survive that?
Well, I wouldn't recommend you doing that because Jewish people regarded the Ark of the Covenant as extremely holy, and only the high priest was allowed to directly interact with it. And so they would probably kill you if you tried to do that. So you probably would not survive. However, I suspect what you may be thinking of is an incident that occurred later than the desert experience in the history of Israel, where during David's time they were transporting the Ark of the Covenant on an ox cart, and the oxen stumbled, and one of the attendants, a guy named Uzzah, reached out his hand to steady the Ark, and he was struck dead. And so you may be wondering, well, like, would I be struck dead by God as opposed to the angry Israelites if I tried to touch the ark? And the answer is we don't know for sure. I mean, obviously, some people had to be able to touch the ark. The craftsman who built it had to touch the ark, and the people who, presumably the high priest, who deposited things inside the ark, like the Ten Commandments and Aaron's rod and a pot of manna, they had to touch the ark in order to put the things in it. So merely touching the ark was not an automatic death sentence. So why would Uzzah get struck dead when he touched the ark? Well, one thing you find out when you read what the Old Testament has to say about transporting the ark is that you weren't supposed to put it on an ox cart. It had these rings on it, and you were supposed to have poles, and you would put the poles through the rings, and then a group of Levites would hoist up the poles on their shoulders and carry the ark that way. And so by transporting the ark in this unauthorized way of putting it on an ox cart, they were breaking God's explicit instructions about it. And so that may be why Uzzah didn't survive when he touched the ark, because they were transporting the ark in an illegitimate, forbidden way, and he was facilitating that process. And so can't say for sure which category you would fall in if you touched the ark. It could be that you would fall in the category of the craftsmen or the high priests that were able to touch it without being struck dead, or it could be that God would say, nah, this guy's acting more like Uzzah. So that's really up to God to decide.
John, thank you for your call today. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it, and thanks for listening. Before we go to a break here in just a couple of moments, I want to remind everyone that if you would like to connect more deeply with the apostolate here at Catholic Answers, with our ministry, become a greater part of what we do, one of the great ways to do that is by joining Society 315. So Society 315 is our monthly giving club. For just $10 a month, you get a Society t-shirt, you get a car magnet, you get a permanent 20% discount on all of the products that you buy from our online shop. In addition, this is a great time to join because for Society members only, on June the 8th, we have a webinar coming up with our own Cy Kellett and Trent Horn talking about the repeal of Roe versus Wade and the potential consequences. What's next after, if in fact it is repealed by the Supreme Court, what's next for the pro-life movement? So if you'd like to join in on that webinar, The way to do it, the only way to do it, is to be or become a member of Society 315. Go to casociety315.com, casociety315.com, and commit to a $10 a month donation or more, and you will get further communications on us on how to fully activate your membership, including an invitation to that upcoming webinar on June 8th. More Open Forum with Jimmy Akin coming up. Jennifer, Marie, Thomas, and Joel are on the board. We're going to try to get to all four of you before we're finished today, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this.
Hang on. Catholic Answers Live will return in a moment.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Go forth and preach the good news. It's not just a suggestion. If you want to take more seriously the command of Jesus to share the gospel with those around you, consider joining St. Paul Street Evangelization. It's a grassroots organization that brings the Catholic faith to the streets in a non-confrontational way. Visit our website, www.streetevangelization.com, to learn more. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. It's time to do our part.
Divine Intimacy Radio.
The greatest joy in my life is helping others to come to know Christ more fully. And there's no better light on this path, the path to deep union with God, than the wisdom of the saints. Talking about this daily on EWTN Radio is one of the great joys of my life.
Divine Intimacy Radio, Sunday, 6:30 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 11 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. David Matheson sitting in for Cy Kellett today, and Jimmy Akin. We are in the midst of an open forum with Jimmy, and we're going to go right back to the lines. Let's go to line one. Jennifer in Canada, watching on YouTube. Jennifer, ask your question, please, of Jimmy.
Hi, Jimmy. Thank you for taking my call. I had a discussion with my sister, who is a non-denominational Protestant, about the necessity of baptism. I mentioned to her that she had never been baptized, and she said that she had, but in the spirit when she became a Christian. Basically, the discussion surrounded the requirement of water for baptism, and I had mentioned the scripture verse John 3:5, and she said that being born of the water in this verse was referring to amniotic fluid and describing childbirth, and that what was important in this verse was being born of the Spirit, and that's the only requirement for baptism, so no need for water with a baptism. I believe her interpretation of the verse is incorrect. She maintains that this verse proves her point. I don't know how to explain that the water in the verse from John 3:5 is not referring to childbirth, and why water is necessary for a baptism. So I was wondering if you could explain it.
So the first problem is that, and I this is a view that I've known about for a long time. I was taught this back before I was Catholic, so I used to hold this view. And as I did more study, I realized that there were problems with this view. And some of the problems include the following. The first one is that it is exceptionally hard to find references in which ancient Greek authors use the word for water, hudor, to refer to amniotic fluid. This is not a standard usage. If you look up the word hudor in a Greek lexicon or Greek dictionary, amniotic fluid will not be listed. Not in any standard one, certainly. And that's because we just don't have a lot of references to Greeks using the term this way. Another problem is not obvious in English, but the Greek grammar is such that it at least suggests that this is a unitary event, that it's a birth of water and spirit. It's not two separate births. And one of the things that points in that direction is the presence of a pronoun that is in front of the phrase in Greek, water and the spirit. The pronoun is ek, and there are other ways in Greek that you could simply say of water and of the spirit, and the presence of the pronoun is something that that points us in the direction of this is a single event. This is a birth of both water and spirit, not two separate births. Also, so Jesus in John 3:5 tells Nicodemus that you have to be born of water and spirit. And when Nicodemus questions that, Jesus responds in verse 10 by saying, "Are you a teacher of Israel, and yet you do not understand this?" So it's like he expects Nicodemus to already be familiar with something from Jewish teaching that would lead him to expect a birth of water and spirit. And if you go back into the Old Testament, there's really one notable passage that talks about God applying water and affecting our spirits. It's in Ezekiel, where there is a prophecy about one day God is going to wash us with clean water, and he's going to change our hearts, or he's going to sprinkle us with clean water, and he's going to, or which is a form of washing, and he's going to give us new hearts, and it's going to affect a change in our spirits. And he's doing this, of course, by his Holy Spirit. And so it sounds like that passage is what Jesus has in mind, that's what he's expecting Nicodemus to be familiar with. And that passage involves the application of water. And so that would seem to be background that involves water, but it doesn't all rest on just this passage. You have other passages in the New Testament that clearly refer to us receiving new life or regeneration or new birth in connection with baptism. If you look in Romans, for example, Paul talks about us rising to new life as a result of our baptism. And your sister might say, well, this is spirit baptism, or this is some kind of spiritual baptism. But at that point, the burden of proof is on her. We've already seen that John 3:5 does not prove her point. There are other ways of taking it that have support, like the supports I just mentioned. So we know that baptism, at least the way the term is normally used, involves water, because we see that all over the place. I mean, we see that in the Gospels, that baptism involves water. We see that in the book of Acts. We even see that in the epistles. And so we have a bunch of documentation that for water involving baptism, but we don't have good evidence for the alternative, for a kind of purely spiritual baptism that does not involve water. So the burden of proof, I think, is on your sister on that point. Then, especially if she's trying to convince you that baptism does not need to involve water. Then we have 1 Peter 3:21. And in 1 Peter 3:21, Peter is explicitly talking about water. He's drawing a comparison to what happened in Noah's flood, in which he says 8 people were saved through water. And then he says, in the same way, baptism now saves you. And so he has just put water and baptism on the table together and said that saves you, which is a description of the new birth or regeneration or salvation, or whichever one of these terms you want to use. Finally, there is historical evidence in the form of the church fathers. So many of them were Greek speakers, and all of them were closer in time and culture to the New Testament than we are. And if you go through the writings of the church fathers, you will not find any of them interpreting John 3:5 in this way. I once did a study, this was years ago, back around the time I became Catholic, where I did electronic searches of huge, enormous, this 38-volume set of the Church Fathers, and I looked up all the references to John 3:5, and none of them said that it's amniotic fluid. So if her amniotic fluid hypothesis was correct, why didn't anybody in the early church say that? And why do all of the authors in the early church say, no, that's baptism, if they address the question?
Jennifer, thanks for your call today. We appreciate that. I hope that answer was useful. Let's go ahead and go to Marie in Seattle, Washington. Marie is listening on Sacred Heart Radio. Go ahead with your question, Marie.
Oh, hi.
Hello.
Hi, what's your question?
Yes, I am at the store right now, but then I will tell you one thing. Yeah, so
Okay, Marie, we're running out of time, and I want to give you the best answer I can, so I need you to ask me the question.
Yes. Let me go out and here. You know what? I say that's the way I feel is that people give birth to children because they were young, and that's the instinct, you know. So, but then if they delay until like older, and then they still have the chance to give birth, I think they might choose not to give birth at all. Do you feel like that?
So if I understand your question, is it better not to have children because of how bad the world is? And I would say, no, it is not good to avoid children because of the state of the world for a couple of reasons. One reason is that that the state of the world, although it is worse in some ways than it used to be, in many other ways, we're living in the best time in history. The idea that the past was golden and it was much superior to the present is actually not true. A book that discusses that you might want to check out is by Steven Pinker. It's called The Better Angels of Our Nature, and he's not even a Christian, but looking at various indicators like your chances of dying a violent death, we're living in a much better time than at any point in history. Similarly, people have much more freedom today than they have at any point in history. Now, that has brought with it some problems with people abusing their freedom, but on balance, we're actually in a pretty good place in human history. But there are some big problems we do need to look out for, like and address, like abortion. In terms of the second reason, existing is a good thing. It's better to exist than not to exist, and everything is in God's hands anyway. He can guide and protect people in the world. He can lead them to Him, and He can give them a glorious eternity where they have infinite beatitude, infinite happiness for all eternity. And whatever evils you may have had to deal with when you were in the world, it's better to exist and have the opportunity to experience God's presence for all eternity than not to exist. And so I don't think people should avoid having children at all because of problems in the world today. I think we should trust God. I think we should have, the children we can reasonably handle, and then we should trust God to guide us and guide our children to Him over the course of their lives.
Thank you, Marie. We're going to move on. Thomas, we're going to take your question. Thomas calling from St. Paul, watching on YouTube. Hey, Thomas, ask your question really quickly, and Jimmy will see if we can get you a good answer, okay? Go ahead, Thomas.
All right, thank you. So, in short, Jesus came in His passion, death, and resurrection to free us from original sin, but still afterwards we're affected by the effects of original sin. So, in short, if Jesus came to free us from original sin and its effects, why are we still dealing with things like pain, sickness, and death after, or even after receiving sanctifying grace?
So the basic answer is God has chosen to use processes. And this applies in many different aspects of His creation. We can't say for sure why God chose to use a process in a particular case rather than doing something instantly, but we can see that He has clearly made that choice because there's a process to how plants grow. They don't just appear fully formed. There's a process to how humans grow. They don't just appear fully formed. God uses processes for things, and among the things that we can tell from the fact we do still experience suffering is that He chose to use a process in how He applies what Christ did for us. So we don't expect it all at once, but God will lead us to a state where we don't have pain and suffering anymore. And St. Paul says that the sufferings of this life are not worth comparing to what God has in store for us. So we need to recognize that God uses processes, including with respect to salvation, and trust Him and look forward to what He has in store for us.
Very good. I hope that answer was good for you, Thomas. Joel, I'm sorry we didn't get to you today. We can take you call back in tomorrow. We can put you top of the line. Jimmy, thanks for another great hour. We appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you again soon here on Catholic Answers Live. 2 more hours tomorrow, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. Listen in. We'll see you then. God bless.